kick off this workshop, I'm going to briefly go over some of the types of vehicles that exist, and then I'll cover topics such as why you should go EV, EV charging, state of the market, incentives and rebates, existing and upcoming EV models, and then some of our very own upcoming EV-focused events that you might be interested and want to learn more about. So first, let's go through some of the types of vehicles that are currently available. The gas-powered car, this is the one that you're probably all very, very familiar with. Typically, the gasoline-powered car uses an internal combustion engine that is typically spark-ignited. So in this spark-ignited system, the fuel is injected into the combustion chamber and combined with air. This air-fuel mixture is ignited by a spark from the spark plug, and then there's also an exhaust system that pushes exhaust gases from the engine through the tailpipe. And we're going to touch on the problems with exhaust emissions from cars a little bit later on in this presentation. But as we're going through these different types of vehicles that are available, we're basically starting off with those that are least environmentally friendly and working our way towards those that are more environmentally friendly. Next is the conventional hybrid car. You've probably seen these before. You might even own one. Think of like Toyota Prius, for instance. So the hybrid electric vehicles are powered by an internal combustion engine, just like the gas-powered car we were talking about, and then one or more electric motors, which uses energy stored in batteries. A hybrid electric vehicle cannot be plugged in to charge the battery. Instead, the battery is charged through things like regenerative braking and by internal combustion engine. The battery can also power auxiliary loads and reduce engine idling when stopped. So there is some more efficiency there, but it's still not very environmentally friendly, and it still has that exhaust system and it's emitting emissions. Next, we have the plug-in hybrid cars. This is kind of like the middle ground almost between the gas power and plug-in hybrid car and then an EV. Now let me kind of dive in and I'll explain what I mean by that. So the plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, they use batteries to power an electric motor and another fuel such as gasoline, for instance, to power the internal combustion engine. So they still have that internal combustion engine. They also have batteries that can be charged using a wall outlet or charging equipment, kind of like that of an EV. They can also be charged by that internal combustion engine or through regenerative braking. And then the vehicle typically runs on electric power until the battery is nearly depleted, and then the car automatically switches over to the internal combustion engine. And I will also note that the battery itself that runs on electric power, you can't get nearly as much mileage out of it as you would with an EV. So the majority of the time, you're still going to be running using that internal combustion engine. So then we have the star of the show for tonight, the electric vehicle. So an electric car is powered by an all-electric motor instead of a gasoline engine, that internal combustion engine. It uses energy stored in its rechargeable batteries, which are recharged by common household electricity. And because it runs on electricity, the vehicle emits no exhaust from a tailpipe and does not contain the typical liquid fuel components, such as like a fuel pump, a fuel line, or a fuel tank. So this is a much more environmentally friendly route. And let's kind of dive into what I mean by that. So why go EV? There are some great benefits with adopting electric vehicles as a source of transportation in comparison to a gas-powered vehicle. Some of those benefits are environmentally related, some are more financially focused, and then some are also just convenience focused. So one reason to go EV is for the health, for your own personal health, but also the health of the planet. So pollutants that come out of a car's tailpipe cause human health problems such as asthma and lung cancer, but they can also damage crops and forests and buildings and contribute to climate change. So I'm going to briefly go over these different kinds of emissions or gases that are coming out of a tailpipe and the problems associated with them. So the first thing is carbon monoxide. It's a poisonous gas that can cause headaches, nausea, fatigue, and in high concentrations, it could lead to inducing a coma or death. And then nitrogen oxides and sulfur dioxide contribute to acid rain, which can make bodies of water more acidic and also release more aluminum from soil, which can be harmful for wildlife. It can also strip nutrients from foliage, corrode metal, deteriorate paint, increase maintenance costs, and dirty up surfaces. It also depletes the ozone layer, which shields the Earth from harmful ultraviolet radiation from the sun. Then we have particulate matter, so like soot and metal particles typically produced by diesel engines. These cause skin and eye irritation and allergies, and very fine particles can get lodged deep into the lungs where it can cause respiratory problems and lung disease. And we have hydrocarbons, which react with nitrogen dioxide and sunlight and form ozone. Ozone can be beneficial in the upper atmosphere, but harmful at a more ground kind of level. Ozone inflames the lungs that can cause chest pains and coughing and make it difficult to breathe by reducing the volume of air that the lungs can take in. And then carbon monoxide is the other one I wanted to touch on. So it's another exhaust gas. It's particularly dangerous to infants and people suffering from heart disease because it interferes with the blood's ability to transport oxygen. So if you're like me, I love to think of a reality and a kind of scenario where we live in a more healthy sort of environment with less smog and air pollution, and where I don't have to keep receiving these spare the air alerts that come from the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. I don't know if you've received these before, especially for those of you that are joining us tonight in the Bay Area. But I'd love to no longer see these, or at least to the very minimum. And one way I think we could really achieve that is through adopting electric vehicles, because once again, electric vehicles emit no tailpipe pollutants, and therefore they do not contribute to air pollution. So just imagine if everyone drove an electric vehicle, we could drastically reduce air pollution and its harmful effects on human health, which again include things like stroke, heart disease, lung cancer, and respiratory diseases, including things such as asthma. And if you're a visual learner, this is a little bit hyperbolic, but it kind of sets the stage here. On the left-hand side, you have that really heavily dense, smoggy, kind of dirty atmosphere and air. And then on the right-hand side, you have that clean, bright, and blue air that I'd love to breathe in. Now let's take a look at this. So burning fossil fuels such as coal, oil, and gas produces carbon dioxide, which then traps heat in the atmosphere and increases the Earth's temperature. As you can see from this slide, transportation accounts for over 40% of California's carbon emissions. I say over 40%, technically 38%, but pretty close. Here in the Silicon Valley, which is where I'm based out of, transportation accounts for over 60% of our emissions. And as Roya mentioned earlier, in Sunnyvale, it's almost 50% of their emissions in their area. So if you're environmentally motivated, then you could easily argue that adopting an electric vehicle instead of your typical gas-powered vehicle is a form of taking climate action. Now, if you're more like fiscally motivated and concerned more about money, there are two ways in which you will save money as an EV owner. So let's first focus on one of them, and that will be how EVs cost less to fuel. So electricity is 1/3 the price of gas. An average EV driver in California saves about $830 a year in fuel costs. So going EV makes even more sense when compared to the ever rising gas prices that we're seeing, especially here in the area. It's been ridiculous lately. But another way you can save money as an EV owner is with the lack of maintenance. So there's far less maintenance for an electric vehicle because EVs have fewer moving parts. So you don't have to replace or fix things that you would see in a typical gas-powered car with that internal combustion engine, such as the air filter, the alternator, the clutch, a fuel filter, fuel injectors, fuel pump, motor mounts, motor oil, muffler, oil filter, radiator, the radiator hoses, spark plugs, the starter, timing belts, catalytic converter, water pump, and no biannual emission test. And if you're still not convinced, so let's talk about this a little bit. Consumer Reports magazine in 2020 confirmed that EV owners spend half as much on maintenance than gas car owners, over the lifetime of their cars. So the gas car owner spends roughly around $9,200 versus $4,600 for the EV owner on average maintenance and repair costs over the life of the vehicle. So owning an electric vehicle will save the typical driver also around $6,000 to $10,000 over the life of the vehicle when you're also taking into account fueling costs. And here's another way to look at savings and also the environmental impact. So this is from Peninsula Clean Energy. This graphic compares the fuel and maintenance costs and the different level of carbon emissions generated by EVs versus gas-powered cars. You can see gas-powered cars emissions are about 7,185 pounds of CO2 equivalents per year. And that's 20 times that of an EV, which is around 354 pounds of CO2 equivalents a year. In terms of cost, they estimate around 1,320 a year for fuel maintenance versus 2,509 a year for that gas car. And the plug-in hybrid, while it is better than the gas car in terms of money spent and emissions. It's still not quite as good as the electric vehicle. Now, I need to talk about this a little bit. So first, I'm going to just explain kind of what the benefit was here of the carpool lane decal that you can get for your car, and then some unfortunate news with it as well. So the one benefit is that EV owners get to drive in the carpool lane as single occupants. They don't have to worry about the highway patrol because you are in the carpool lane as a single passenger. All new batteries, EVs, and plug-in hybrids qualify for this clean air vehicle decal that is valid for up to 4 years. There's a caveat to that, though, which I'll mention in just a second. So if you purchase a used electric vehicle that already had the sticker before, you were able to extend this for another 2 years too if you fall under specific income thresholds. However, the downside is that this is, from my understanding, expiring in 2025. And from what I've read in my research, there's no plans to change this for the time being. Definitely keep an eye out for it, though. So that means if you want to take advantage of this, you have until 2025. You would need to act relatively quickly in terms of your EV vehicle adoption. There's also some perks depending on what city or jurisdiction you live in too, so you might want to look into that. This one is no longer valid, but I did want to mention it as just an example that did exist at one point in time, and that was in San Jose. If you registered or purchased your EV in San Jose, you were able to get free parking at all city meters and Park San Jose garages for a one-time $35 registration fee, which was an awesome perk. They did discontinue it, but depending on where you live in the Bay Area, you might want to look into that to see if your community offers something special. And then again, just going back to those decals, this is kind of what they look like. So if you have a qualifying clean air vehicle, CAV, with a green, yellow, blue, or orange clean air decal, you are eligible to drive in the carpool lane on state-owned bridges and in Bay Area express lanes as a single occupant and receive applicable toll discounts. You must use a properly set Fast Track Flex or Fast Track CAV toll tag to receive a discount on Bay Area express lanes. And my colleague Jackie should be putting a link in the chat, kind of discussing that a little bit more in the requirements for it. So both the green, the yellow, and the blue expire in 2025, and then the orange one is set to expire in 2024. All right, so we're moving quickly here, but those are some of the perks to owning an EV. Now I want to, sorry, I accidentally skipped that. I want to kind of like skim the surface, if you will, of EV charging, because this is a question we get asked quite a bit, especially at our in-person expos. And in particular, I'm going to go over just the charging stations and types of charging that are available. Again, just skimming the surface here, we do have a more in-depth charging workshop coming up in 2 weeks, which I'll touch on more at the end of this event if you're interested. So first is level 1 charging. This is by far the slowest method, but it is sufficient for certain types of drivers who maybe charge overnight or do minimal traveling in trips, like within maybe a 30 to 40 mile bracket per day. All electric cars come with this cable that can be plugged into a standard wall outlet with no equipment installation required, which is pretty nice, especially if this is your first time having a vehicle like this. Level 1 works well within a home environment, work, or anywhere. You can bring this along with you, especially when you have sufficient time to charge. It's ideal for a plug-in electric, like plug-in hybrid electric, because they have those smaller batteries, but it can work for an EV depending on what your needs are. So it's really just kind of dependent on what kind of driver you are and what kind of trips you need to take. In terms of speed, this is why I'm saying that. So level 1 charging adds about 3.5 to 6.5 miles of driving range per hour of charging time. So it's a little bit on the slower end of things. And now we have level 2 charging, which is considerably faster. So this requires installing a charger station, also known as electric vehicle supply equipment. So charging station installation requires a dedicated 240 volt or 208 volt electric circuit, similar to what would be used for clothes dryer or an electric range. And depending on the battery type, charger configuration, and circuit capacity, level 2 charging adds about 14 to 35 miles of range per hour of charging time. So in comparison to the level 1, which is about 3.5 to 6.5 miles of driving range per hour. So significant difference there. These are found quite a bit, I would say, out in public, in workplace settings and parking lots and things like that. And it's also used in homes. It uses that same standard connector as a level 1 charger, meaning any electric car can plug in at any level 2 charger. Then we have like DC or level 3 fast charging. This provides the fastest available like fill up, if you will, in quotes. It requires a 480 volt connection, making DC fast charging unsuitable for your home. And not every electric car model is equipped for it, but most are these days. And stations offering DC fast charging are found in shopping centers, movie theaters, most parking lots out in public. You will see them also along like major traveling corridors, freeways, highways, things like that. It's a great outlet in terms of charging up your car quickly, especially if you want to take longer trips. And then depending on the battery type, the charger configuration and circuit capacity, DC fast charging can add up to about 10 miles of range per minute in comparison to level 2, which is 14 to 35 miles of range per hour. So 10 miles of range per minute compared to 14 to 35 miles of range per hour. And then Actera doesn't endorse this brand at all, but I just wanted to mention this as one of many kind of like startups and companies out there that are trying to make owning an EV and the charging aspect more and more convenient. And that's Spark Charge. So Spark Charge has a mobile app that you can download. But from my understanding, they're relatively new, so they might not be within your area, but definitely worth checking out if you think this would interest you. And you can essentially schedule your DC fast charging with them, and it's brought directly to your vehicle. So you order charging kind of on the go. So this might be great for you if you are seeing a movie and you can't seem to find an available charging station, or the charging stations nearby you are broken or out of order. This is definitely a possibility worth exploring. So again, it's more for the convenient kind of thing of waiting in lines or being restricted, or maybe in an area where there's not just charging stations available whatsoever. And then I want to briefly touch on this too. We also don't endorse this brand. They're called Go Power EV, but I do want to mention them as one of many solutions and companies trying to address the problem with multifamily housing charging. So Go Power EV is a charging solution for multifamily housing that is, in quotes, cost effective in terms of installation fees and maintenance fees. So what they're trying to do is that each space in a designated like parking garage in a multifamily housing complex will be pre-wired with a wired solution that they provide, and it only requires like one installation process and permit. So kind of easy on the landlord's end. And then they add these power boxes that you're seeing in this image here for charging. So then they add EV chargers to assigned parking spaces with their own designated meter, and you can do level 1 or level 2 charging with this solution. And then the charging is all set up using an app. So from how I understand it, the owner of that vehicle and paying for that designated charging space in their parking spot would get billed, and it wouldn't go to the complex as a whole. And then this is kind of a tip slide for those of you that might be a new owner or thinking about getting an EV relatively soon. We really recommend that you're charge ready before buying your new EV. So although most of your charging will be done at home, there will be times when you won't want to use a public charger. It's just the way it goes, right? Sometimes we forget to plan in time or aren't able to get the range that we need, and we're going to have to use charging stations out in public. So we recommend setting up your public charging accounts before you bring that new EV home. And essentially the best way to go about that is to download the apps on your phone, get your account set up, add your card, get that all registered, and then you can begin to use the apps. It's relatively simple. I've done it myself. It's very quick and easy. It just takes a matter of minutes, really. ChargePoint operates both level 2 and DC fast charging stations throughout the Bay Area. There's also EVgo and Electrify America. They offer mostly DC fast chargers too. Electrify America has stations all throughout the Bay Area. I just looked today, so technically they don't have any in Sunnyvale, at least that I'm aware of, but they are in nearby areas in San Jose, Milpitas, etc., especially up in the East Bay too. And then with Electrify America, ChargePoint, and EVgo, they allow roaming on each other's networks, which is great. So you just need to adjust your settings and search filters so that they can find each other's chargers. And then before I forget, PlugShare app or things like ChargeHub It's essentially a service where you can use their search engine to find available charging stations near you in whatever area. You can put in like a specific address or zip code or city. Right, so now we're going to touch briefly on the state of the markets, and then we'll touch on some EV models that are currently out, some that are popular, some that qualify for certain incentives and rebates that are available, and then some that are upcoming. And then, like I said, we will mention some EV events that we have coming up at the end of the year. And one thing I didn't forget to mention earlier on in my presentation today is that we're designating some time for breakout rooms, and we have some amazing, experienced and passionate EV owners here that will be leading those breakout rooms. So if you have any specific questions about owning an EV, range anxiety, things like that, they'll be here to help. So things are looking really good for this year in terms of the EV market. The International Energy Agency claims that electric car markets are seeing exponential growth as sales exceeded 10 million in 2022. And then the share of electric cars in total sales has more than tripled in 3 years, from 4% in 2020 to 14% in 2022. And in 2020, the United States sold about 600,000 EVs. In comparison to 2022, about 1 million have been sold, and they're anticipating somewhere around like 1.6 million for 2023, which is super exciting. They also expect about 14 million sales globally by the end of this year, which is great. And then Cars.com released a survey of theirs, the results of the survey. And what the survey indicated is that about 39% of in-market shoppers polled were considering an EV, and around 50% of respondents would consider an EV or hybrid if they were purchasing it within the next year. Now, there are some concerns with EV adoption and this culture change and this movement underway from a consumer perspective. And in the study that Cox Automotive administered, essentially what they realized from the consumers that they surveyed and the dealers that they surveyed is that there's some worries and concerns here in terms of costs and battery life and charging infrastructure. But thankfully, a lot of that is changing. A lot of jurisdictions and cities are adding more and more charging infrastructure. Rebates and incentives, not only for EV purchasing, but for charging infrastructure, are available now. And then in this study that was conducted by Recurrent Motors Incorporated, they found that batteries are lasting longer than the vehicle itself. They read around, I think it was 15,000 EVs at the 100,000 mile mark, and they still had about 90% of the original range left, and the feature was looking good. So if you have a lot of anxiety in terms of like, what would the battery replacement fee cost if I got an EV and stuff like that, chances are you're probably pretty good there. We will be sharing that article too, if you want to look into it some more. Incentives and rebates. So I'm only going to briefly touch on this as well. We have an event solely focused on incentives and rebates in November. If you're interested, highly encourage you to attend. But there are things such as the federal tax credit. So if you buy a new electric vehicle, you could be eligible for a tax credit as high as $7,500. And with used electric car owners, you may qualify for up to $4,000 in tax breaks as of 2023. Now, there are requirements to get this. It has to meet specific requirements in terms of the vehicle's battery production and as well as proper material sourcing. I'm not going to go too into that today, but the credit gets split into two. So if it meets one of the requirements, you could get $3,750. If it meets both requirements, you would get the full $7,500. This is a non-refundable tax credit that offsets your tax bill dollar for dollar. Non-refundable in the sense that once your tax bill has been reduced to zero, any leftover credit is forfeited. The government won't pay you out that remainder to you. You'll see the California Clean Vehicle Rebate Project listed here. I'm only mentioning it because they are out of funds. So if you were hoping to get this, you can still apply, but you'll most likely be waitlisted, and there's no guarantee right now that you would actually receive the rebate, which is unfortunate, but definitely worth mentioning. There's the Clean Cars for All, just one of many rebates and incentives out there. This one is about $5,500 to $9,500 for a newer used EV to replace your older internal combustion engine car for an EV or a plug-in electric hybrid. And then the California e-bike incentive program, this still isn't available from my understanding. It was supposed to launch at the end of this year, and it looks like it might get delayed. So I'm hoping early 2024, although we'll just have to wait and see. This would be a great incentive program if you're interested in e-bikes, where there's a voucher of up to $1,000 for a regular e-bike, and then 1,750 if you want a cargo or adaptive e-bike. And then there's a resource down here called Electric for All, where you can type in your zip code and see what kind of rebates and incentives are available in your area. And going back to that tax credit, so something's changing, which is exciting in 2024. It goes into effect January 1st, so right away. It'll be available as a point of sale discount now as well. You have to opt into it, but this means you'll no longer have to wait until the year after when you do your taxes to receive that credit. You can receive it at the time of purchase, at the time of purchase for your new vehicle from the dealership. So that might be more compelling and beneficial for some people's circumstances. All right, looking at the time, it's about 7:30, so moving right along here. Now let's touch on some EV models that are currently available. Again, we don't endorse these brands, but would encourage checking them out if they are of interest to you. First is the VW ID4, which does qualify for the tax credit, the full 7,500, specifically the 2023 model. If you do get this car, it's got a range of about 275 miles, and the starting MSRP does vary, but let's say like roughly around 40K. When you get this car too, you get 3 years included of 30-minute charging sessions with Electrify America, so that DC fast charging, which is great. Also has some neat features. The car can sense your presence and start up when you have your key fob in your hand and you sit in the driver's seat and press down on the brake pedal. So kind of this like smart car starting kind of feature. It also has some travel assist features as well for cruise control, sensing your surroundings, slowing up or speeding up, depending on who's around you and things like that. The Chevrolet Bolt, one of our ambassadors has a Chevy Bolt. I believe it's not the EUV model. His name's Lawrence. He'll clarify in the breakout room. But this is an amazing vehicle as well, both just the general Chevy Bolt and the EUV. And it's one of the more affordable EV models on the market. And it starts around 27,000, 28,000, depending on where you're buying. It's got a range of 247 miles. This does qualify for the full 7,500 clean vehicle tax credit. And it's got a lot of great leg room, adequate storage, 5-passenger seating, and can go 0 to 60 in 7 seconds. If you're looking for something larger, you might be interested in the Rivian R1S. This does qualify for partial credit, so you can get 3,750 for this vehicle. Range is about 290 to 390, depending on what version of the model you get. And the MSRP, though, for this is relatively high. It starts around 72, 78K, but it does have a lot of storage. It's got a built-in air compressor for your tires. Drives in 3 feet plus of water, 14.9 inches of ground clearance. This is really a good car for those of you that like to be kind of more outdoorsy and on rougher terrains. And then the Ford F-150 Lightning, this qualifies for the tax credit too. You can get the full credit for this. MSRP can start around 56,000 and go quite a bit up depending on what trim you choose to get. Range also varies depending on the trim from 240 to 320 miles, and this can seat up to 5 people. It's got a towing capacity of 10,000 pounds and 11 power outlets, which is great. USB-C charging, USB-A charging, and you can even use this to power your tools and potentially your home. And depending on the usage, they claim you could power your home for up to 3 to 10 days. The Hyundai Ioniq 6. This does not qualify for the tax credit, unfortunately, but it was EV of the year, so I wanted to mention this. Currently, the MSRP is a little bit on the higher end. It's 49 to 55K, but they did announce that the 2024 model will be cheaper, about 4,000 or so less, starting around $38,600. So worth mentioning, 270 to 360 mile range, depending on the trim. It's got remote smart parking, can charge from 10 to 80% in 18 minutes if you're using that level 3 charger, and can go 0 to 60 miles per hour in less than 5 seconds, so very fast. The Hyundai Ioniq 5 is also a very popular model. I've been seeing a lot of these lately, and we have some ambassadors in our program that own them and just absolutely love it. Fortunately, this also doesn't qualify for the tax credit, but I did want to mention it. Range is around 303 miles. MSRP is around 43 to 55K. This was Edmunds' 2023 top-rated electric SUV. Pretty fast with charging in terms of range, so 10 to 80% in 25 minutes using a DC fast charger, so not too different from the Ioniq 6, and 320 horsepower. Tesla Model 3, also a very popular model that I'm sure you see around quite a bit. I know I do, at least in this area. The range can vary from around 267 to 333 miles. MSRP starts at around 40K and up. You can get the tax credit of up to 7,500 for this, which is wonderful. It's got a glass roof, excellent range and performance and handling. You have access to Tesla's supercharger network, which is great, in-car gaming and streaming. It's pretty good vehicle utility. And then the Nissan Leaf is another one that I want to mention, partly because of its size. It's on the smaller side of things, kind of like the Chevy Bolt, and it's one of the more affordable cars, kind of like the Chevy Bolt. So MSRP starts around 28K or so. And the 2024 version qualifies for a partial tax credit, which is exciting. So if you get the 2024 version, you can get up to 3,750. It's got different modes. It has eco mode to improve efficiency. And you also get a $100 EVgo charging credit if you purchase this vehicle. Now, some new and upcoming car models. First is the Subaru Solterra. So the estimated range for this is 220 miles. This actually just came out, so I believe you can get this vehicle now. Starting MSRP is around 45K. It's got an eyesight driver assist technology where it monitors traffic movement, optimizes cruise control, and warns you when you're swaying outside of your lane. It's got 8.3 inches of ground clearance, so I tell people if they're interested in something more for the outdoors, this might be a good vehicle for you as well, kind of like the Rivian. The Fisker Ocean 1. So this has a range of around 360. MSRP for this variant is around 68,000, but the cheaper variant should be coming out relatively soon and hopefully start as low as 37,000. That's what they're claiming. We'll see when that time comes, but that would be great. This is a mid-size SUV that performs kind of like a sports car, handles sharp turns really well, smart traction to improve stability on wet and icy roads. It's also a mobile power source, so you can use this to charge another EV or even run your home. We got the VW ID Buzz. I have to mention this one just because I have some fond memories with my parents' VW ID bus. But this is already available in Europe and should arrive in the US in 2024. They're estimating a range of around 200 to 300 miles, 282 horsepower. And they don't know what the MSRP is going to be yet. They haven't announced it publicly, but in Europe, it's about 65K. So they're thinking maybe around 70K in the US, but again, they're not quite sure. This model will be slightly larger than the European version. It's got a maximum of 7 seats and 3 rows. Different driving configurations, 5.3-inch screen in the front of the steering wheel. Colorways are not also officially confirmed, but we've seen it in orange, yellow, this kind of seafoam green, and then this blue right here. And that is going to be the first like fully electric van, if I'm not mistaken. It's very exciting. And we have the Kia EV9. So starting MSRP is 54,900. Estimated range is to be 300 miles and can tow up to 5,000 pounds. This has 7 seats, so a good vehicle if you need to seat a lot of people. 379 horsepower and can go 0 to 60 in about 5 seconds. This is also a vehicle with somewhat decent ground clearance, so it's 7.8 inches, not bad at all. And then a neat thing with this car is it has a heat pump to help preserve the all-electric range in cold weathers. It collects wasted heat from the motor to keep the cabin warm. All right, so before we go into our breakout rooms, some upcoming events. On November 11th, from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m., we have our EV Financial Incentives Clinic and EV Expo. So if you want to learn more about what rebates and incentives are available, right now, I would highly recommend attending this. And then right outside of the presentation room will be an in-person expo where you can see some of these vehicles firsthand and get to talk to the owners, sit in the vehicle, and things like that. You can register using this QR code, but we'll also send you a link in a follow-up email. And then our last EV event for this year, but definitely more will come in 2024, is this charging workshop. So if you want to get a better understanding of EV charging, I know I just skimmed the surface. Please attend this for a more of a deep dive. My colleagues will be hosting this. And it's on November 16th from 7 to 8 p.m. This one is virtual. Again, you can scan this QR code to register, and we'll be sending a link over to you. I'd also like to thank our sponsor one more time, City of Sunnyvale, for supporting our efforts and our mission to essentially make the Bay Area have cleaner air quality and making this a more sustainable community as a whole. And I'd like to thank all of you for joining us this evening as well. We'd love to get your feedback. There's a short survey. You can scan the QR code here. And like I've been saying, we'll send it to you as well, but your feedback is always appreciated so we can continue to improve these events. But with that out of the way, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and